Stop it, Don.
Oh, sorry. Save it for Chicago. Yeah, I heard you.
I know that's private time. That's
what? Well,
anyway.
Well, we're public now. We're live.
That's
at
right.
least that's what it says on my screen. So, yeah, thank you for joining us out there, all of you who are watching, and thank you for my to my lovely and talented guests here tonight on the Earth's Mightiest Critics superhero edition of Spider-Man 3. We're going to be talking about this movie, which turned 15 years old this summer. It's almost old enough to drive. It's
almost old enough for James Franco to hang out with.
Wow. Oh, we're launching right into
it. Sorry.
Wow.
In fairness, I think this was before he was publicly considered a creep. So we'll time capsule our emotions about the people who star in this film somewhat, and we're just going to talk about it. Why are we talking about Spider-Man 3? Aside from the fact that it's the 15th anniversary of a movie that people probably don't care enough to celebrate anniversaries for. But I recently went back and watched it about a week and a half ago.
What's up?
Oh, hey.
Hey.
What's up?
Hey.
You dissected owl pellet. Well, all right.
I found like a million jawbones.
Okay. I have a good night if I don't see you. Okay, sorry. They're celebrating the 15th anniversary of nothing.
Look at this jawbone.
Oh, cool.
The scary part is those kids were just doing that for fun. It wasn't like part of school or anything.
Yeah, no, they were at the library. They're dorks like that.
Right. Well, no, when I see it's still relevant to comics because when she said I was dissecting owl pellets, I was thinking of Watchmen. Like she was in, like Night Owl's ship. And
it's all part of the circle, guys.
That's right.
It's all part of the circle.
So I was watching Spider-Man 3 with my youngest, who's 5, and we've been getting into comic book movies over the last year, and we've gone through the Supermans, a bunch of the Batmans, and we finally got to Spider-Man, and started off with Raimi's, first, and then we watched Spider-Man 2, and that was an eye-opener because I'd only seen it once in the theater when it came out in 2004, and I have hated that movie for almost 2 decades. Wow. Even though it's widely considered, well, at least before the sort of the Marvel and Nolan Dark Knight, it was widely considered the best comic book movie. It held that title for like a decade. But I watched it again and I was like, okay, I kind of know where my head was at when I watched it the first time, and I understand why I didn't like it. But now I really do adore that movie. And then it came to Spider-Man 3. And I kind of had the same reaction when it was like, okay, now we have to watch Superman 4, The Quest for Peace.
Right.
Got to do it. Got to complete the education.
Yeah.
But I was watching it and I thought to myself, I kept waiting for the moment. I'm like, oh, this is just going to be emo Peter Parker dancing and too many villains and just like bad CGI. And, Goblin has amnesia. It's like very soap opera-y. But what I found, and that's why I wanted to talk to somebody tonight, I'm glad you guys are my lifeline. I'll actually introduce you in a minute, is because I kept waiting. Like a half hour would go by and then an hour. And then like I'm halfway through the film. I'm like, where does this suck? Because I remember it being a lot worse than it is. I'm not saying it doesn't have lots of problems. I'm just saying that whatever is different about my brain than it was in 2007, I appreciate this movie a lot more. And I think it's not a perfect film, but I think it's a perfect capper to Sam Raimi's trilogy. So that's why we're talking about this tonight. And for those of you who might be wondering, again, I'm going to do this every time we talk about a superhero movie. My moratorium on superhero movies, which is lasting about a year, I think I've got 11 months or 10 and a half months left to go. That only counts for new superhero movies and TV shows. I can still go back and watch the classics or Spider-Man 3. And we're making an exception for DC's League of Super Pets in a couple of weeks because
as you should. That's
going to be my youngest first theatrical experience. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my panel here. We've got Topher Grace Ruins Everything, aka Don Shanahan of Every Movie Has a Lesson, and 25 Years Later, and the Cinephile Hissy Fit Podcast. We also have Bully McGuire Johnson, also known as Will Johnson, of also the Cinephile Hissy Fit Podcast. We might as well just call this a special edition Cinephile Hissy Fit Podcast. Don, do you have the bell?
Bet I do.
Nice.
Wow.
But
it's always here, guys.
So I think, not to tell stories out of school, huh? Because you guys are a couple of teachers. We have a fully balanced spectrum on Spider-Man 3 tonight. We've got Don, who even okay, let me just step back a second. I know I've been talking a bunch, but I want to
Mhm.
kind of set the ground rules here. The gateway to entry for this particular show, this live stream. And by the way, if you're watching this, please feel free to like and subscribe and jump into the comments and wrestle with us virtually. We will take all comments and questions. The requirement was you had to have watched Spider-Man 3 recently. I put this call out like a week ago or something, and I said just make sure that you're not holding on to whatever you felt in 2007, whether you loved it or hated it. I want you to watch it with fresh eyes so you can come to the conversation, and argue about it intelligently. Not that everyone's going to be convinced, and that's certainly the case with Don. Don, you did
the
not.
I word. Yeah.
What?
Intelligently.
There's so
Get the
many
wrong
words.
two guys for that. Yeah.
Hey. But
Okay.
so Will might disagree, not for him, but for you. But no. So Don, you did not like this movie in 2007. You don't like it now. Will, you think you said you love this movie?
I do.
Right?
I always have. Yes. And I knew Don was going to come on here. And for that, in full Bully Maguire mode, I'm going to stick some dirt in your eye today, buddy.
Oh God! God, so severe.
The guy liner will keep it out. And I am
Exactly.
square in the middle. I like this movie a lot more than I did when I first saw it, but I'm still not 100%. So let's get into it. All right.
Yeah.
Let's start off with the fact that this movie does have, I'll say it, too many villains.
It does.
It's got Green Goblin Jr., Harry Osborn, played by James Franco. It's got Thomas Hayden Church playing the Sandman. And it has, arguably, there's 4 villains because you've got Eddie Brock played by Topher Grace, and you have Venom, the space symbiote, before he became, got his own franchise. He kind of attaches himself to Eddie Brock. So you've got these 4 villains because Brock was kind of a douche canoe before he got the suit.
I think there's
5? 6?
6. 5 would be Willem Dafoe still shows up to stir the drink of James Franco, and J. Jonah Jameson's always a villain.
I don't think J. Jonah Jameson is a villain. I think he's a human lesson. An obstacle that Pete has to navigate. I'm calling him Pete like we're best friends. Peter Parker, played by Tobey Maguire. But let's. So we've got these overstuffed movie with villains, and that's usually a problem in superhero movies. Even though this thing is like 2 hours and 20 minutes long. But what I thought was really interesting is where this movie starts is compared to where Spider-Man 2 started. Spider-Man 2 is pretty much all about. Peter Parker has this responsibility because he's got great power, but his personal life kind of sucks, and his professional life, he can't get anything together. Whereas in this movie, Spider-Man's the toast of the town. He's got like these big events. He's got girls fawning all over him, including Gwen Stacy and her dad, Captain Stacy, who that's like a setup for a movie that was never going to happen. It's very odd. One of the many odd things about this movie. But in this film, we start off with Peter Parker on top of the world and Mary Jane having all sorts of problems. Her Broadway career is floundering. She doesn't know where she's at with Peter. She feels abandoned by him and by Spider-Man in a weird sense, and she kind of turns to James Franco. So, guys, let's talk. Let me toss this over to you. Just the premise of the movie before we get into the dancing Peter Parker and all that stuff. What do you think of this setup for Spider-Man 3?
Will, you want this first?
Yeah. I will. I'm going to do a couple things with this. The production history, this is one of those tortured production history films that are always fascinating to read about because of the success of the first 2 Spider-Man, for some reason the studio refused to just trust Raimi with his vision, so there are parts of this movie that are clearly Raimi, and then there's studio dictates that were given to him that he had to do. He had to do Venom. His original plan was to do Vulture and Sandman as kind of a combo. And I think he was going to have Ben Kingsley play Vulture, I think, which would have been pretty cool.
I'd heard that, yeah.
But what I like about this film is he said, okay, he played ball. But there is and the reason why I defend this film a lot is because I think he does a pretty admirable job of trying to make his own film and then throwing stuff in there when he has to. I think Sandman is a really compelling villain. I think the 2 big production notes were make Sandman one of Uncle Ben's killers, which is stupid, and force feed Venom into the movie. So I kind of look at it, and I think the first hour and a half, and I don't mind the Bully Maguire stuff or emo Peter Parker stuff. Really, I think it's fine. Is really solid. Like you said, you were waiting every half hour for it to suck, and I don't think it does. I think towards the end, when you can tell the studio was like, okay, let's get Venom in here, I still think Raimi does a good job of putting his stamp on it, because I think Venom is in the tradition of the horror films he makes. There's definitely some chilling imagery. Is it as fleshed out of a character? No, but he had nothing to work with. So it's like one of those things where I know he was put in a situation that he could not control necessarily. So I tend to give the film more of a break, which is why I love it. But in terms of the premise, you asked me about the premise. I think the reason why I love this one, and I love it even more on a revisit, is because I think this is kind of the prototype of the MCU template. When you rewatch this, there is this sense of comfort. Like, I love the opening shot is just kind of Spider-Man just going through the city. There's nothing extravagant about it. It's very like on the next issue of Spider-Man. It's very comfortable. The fact that they introduced so many characters, let's if we ignore the Venom part, which was studio mandated, the fact that you have kind of all these interlocking pieces and it's so comfortably integrated thanks to Raimi doing a masterful job of setting up that universe in the first two. I think that they probably looked at that and said, we could do this over more movies in the future. Like, I kind of did, I cheated a little bit. I haven't watched it since the No Way Home era because I rewatched all the Spider-Man there, but I mean, it's 6 months ago. So, and I've watched it a lot.
I was going to say, I also assume that's probably something I should have mentioned in when I was talking to you guys. Like, if you haven't seen it recently, if you've at least seen it enough that you can, talk about it, then that's fair. Don, I hope I didn't put you through unnecessary torture. Okay.
I mean, yes, but the things I do for your show. So yeah.
I
love it for it.
I was just going to say that I think when I was watching it most recently, I got the most MCU feel from it, and I'm a MCU shill. They know I like that. I like the comfort, and I also like that with a lot of series that have really great continuity. Like for me, the Lethal Weapon movies, Lethal Weapon 1 and 2, are the better movies, but like 3 and 4 are almost more enjoyable to watch in a way because you have that built-in comfort level where you know the characters. There's not a lot of like getting to re-know them, and they don't do the thing that a lot of sequels do where they put them at odds with each other. It's just a good time with your friends. So I think a lot of what this film is, the premise of this film, what they set up, is what would eventually become the MCU format, obviously done a little bit better and with a little bit more structure and not as much like force feeding things in, because they knew they'd have more films down the line to force feed stuff into, as opposed to just like, well, we don't know if there's going to be a Spider-Man 4, so let's get Venom in there now because he's really popular, that kind of thing. So lessons learned.
No, that's a good setting of the table there. So I want to pick up on some of that, but I want to get Don's take.
Sure. If I remember correctly, not only is Venom the studio mandated edition, but Gwen Stacy is too. Am I right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
yes.
So I have to, if I shave Venom and her out just to talk about premise. Sandman is made to be on its own a reasonably compelling villain, and I know we are over inundated with it now, not so much then with the sympathetic villain trope. Arguably, we just had a sympathetic villain trope in Spider-Man 2 with Dr. Octopus, and one that's far more personal and done better than this one, where I get that the dude has a daughter and has extenuating circumstances in which turns him into crime and all that, but the premise, if we're going there, of connecting him as Ben Parker's killer is too much. That's just ridiculous. It was bad when they did it with Jack Nicholson as Jack Napier in Batman. It's bad here. And then I get that the coming out of Spider-Man 2, like you said, Ian, where Spider-Man is on a returned high, to have him go through this cheesy ego trip situation before the symbiote in this movie, I get it. I get that that's where you can extend the highness of where he comes from, and then obviously have some Mary Jane clash in there a little bit because those two have always had just there, but just missed, on hot and cold relationship path. I get that, but at the same time, we spend an awful lot of time with the theater stuff, and we spend which is fine because it's Mary Jane and she's a romantic lead, and you got to pass a Bechdel test somewhere. But the ego trip stuff it gets cheesy in a hurry, and some of that is made worse by the inclusion, and that's where the premise goes further. By the time you rope that into the Gwen Stacy stuff, now it's just really piling on because she has to be everywhere for the key to the city stuff. She's there at the dance scenes. She's there at the dinner with the engagement. Like, she just really ruins the scenes that she comes in more than this guy ruins scenes that we're going to talk about later. But
let's come back to that because I
want to come back to that too.
I very much disagree.
Of course you do.
But I also understand where you're coming from. But
yes.
keep going.
But no, the last thing I'll say, kind of in premise wise, is I don't mind because we knew it was coming in. It was telegraphed for a long time. The emergence of Harry as the next Green Goblin and ascending to that former mantle as father. We knew that progression would be there. It was kind of promised and telegraphed where this was the place to pull that trigger and do so. Now they do it with this really dumb amnesia angle, which is right out of like an 80s soap opera movie where when we're asking about premise, that's a dumb place to go because, like you said, we're making omelets and dancing to 60s tunes, and I'm like, no, Dashboard Conventional soundtrack kids of the aughts millennium is gonna do that. Mm-hmm. So, that's where it loses me. Like, if the premise is root Sandman as deep as they do, all the way to Ben Parker's killer, and place adversity between Peter and Mary Jane with ego in there, and then to emerge James Franco's character higher, but do it with the angle they did. I don't mind it on a cocktail napkin, but in execution, it didn't work for me. And then here we go with what also was piled in to really not make it work, at least for me.
Can I make a comment on the piling in thing, or do we want to wait on that? Because I have
no time like the present, sir.
Okay. So, and this will go to my Gwen Stacy defense too, but I think the reason why some of the stuff that gets tacked on by the studio is so apparent is not only in the rush screenplay, but because this film, just like the MCU would do, has done, or this franchise had done a really great job of like setting up minor stuff. I mean, one thing that will always be really lost with the Spider-Man Raimi films is that we never got Lizard because they set up Kirk Connors very well. They set up, they'd have like cameo appearances by Flash, and the Willem Dafoe is kind of the thing, and the Green Goblin Jr., whatever Ian called it, was I think a well-paced stretch from films 1 to 3. The reason
pacing, I'll agree.
The reason why Gwen Stacy suffers is because it's in hindsight that we didn't get a Spider-Man 4, because I think if we ended up getting a Spider-Man 4, she would have been the perfect foil situation for the fourth film with Mary Jane and her, because I think she only suffers in hindsight, because I actually think her character is an effective stressor for the characters. I think it's an effective dramatic tool, and knowing where the Gwen Stacy character would go in the comics, I think it's a really good setup. And I think I only think the reason why she feels more forced is because we never got that fourth movie. I think if we did, it would have been a better build-up. I think it would have been the perfect introduction to that character. So that's my defense of that.
Go ahead, Ian.
I was going to say, I think, Gwen Stacy is I think she works really well in this movie. Mm-hmm. I think the reason she gets kind of a bad rap, not that Bryce Dallas Howard does, I think she does really well with the character.
She looks and does great.
Right?
She looks incredible in this movie.
Right.
Oh boy.
It's what I like to call the wow.
Take a sip of that Coke, buddy.
Okay. We're not getting
more product placement, right? Yeah. Hey,
a new generation. That's Pepsi.
Hey, wait, we're sponsored by Pepsi. Yeah. She's a victim of what I like to call the normie problem, which is people read comic books. They know that, Gwen Stacy, and spoiler for anyone past like the late 60s, she was sort of one of Peter's early girlfriends, and she died at the hands of the Green Goblin. Now, if you don't know that, if you're just going to see the new Spider-Man movie in 2007, and you don't read the comics, you just know the movies, it's just, okay, she's a new girl named Gwen Stacy, and her dad's the chief of police. And she's sort of this romantic, I like the word that you used, Will, foil for Peter Parker's love life. And I think it fits in because I like that she shows up at the restaurant during the botched proposal, because it helps to establish where Peter's head is at, because it's a great conversation I think, people have in relationships when there's like a best friend of the opposite sex, or even like an acquaintance or a coworker, where Mary Jane is like, she just like put her hand on your shoulder and you didn't think anything of that. And he's like, no, I'm here to propose to you, like he was just completely oblivious to it. And also the key to the city ceremony thing I thought was great, because Spidey shows up, he's hanging upside down. Mary Jane is there to see that. And Peter Parker again, and she rightfully says, she calls him out, I think at the restaurant, like, that was our kiss. When he says, give me a kiss, plant one on me, it'll look great, to Gwen Stacy. And she does. And they recreate that moment from Spider-Man 1, which is such an iconic, I think it's kind of been lost in a lot of the subsequent MCU stuff. But back in the early to mid 2000s, it was like, you saw that kiss everywhere. It was parodied and plastered everywhere. So I like that this movie, even though it's got its problems, it really is conscious of the entire world mythology and continuity that's been building, through the previous two films.
Yeah, no, I think, like you're saying, that would continue if there was another film, and I think it would show that her introduction was properly paced.
Yeah, but it's broken and wrong from the start, because Mary Jane in the Raimi verse is Gwen Stacy. She's the high school girlfriend, the early girlfriend. She's been dangled by a bus.
I see what you mean.
Know what I mean? Like, if the roles were reversed as they kind of maybe should have been, and I know they wouldn't have done this, but if Kirsten Dunst is the hot redhead from work, go get him Tiger Mary, the actual Mary Jane, and all of this whole time, and it would require dropping all the actress stuff that Mary Jane made that character. But like, unfortunately, Mary Jane has always been created in the Raimiverse to be in the Gwen Stacy spot. So for the Gwen Stacy who isn't going to die to show up in the not die spot is a comic sin in my opinion. But
here's the thing, and again, but that's, and I agree with you, Don, as a comic sin, but we're talking about its own a thing that's its own beast.
But now, when you force it into the movie,
right? But here's
that's
the
where
thing.
We're like, ooh, now you're sitting in, rubbing it in, like, it's a little much.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, and maybe they just should have named this character something else. She could have been a comely blonde whose dad happens to be the chief of police.
You can make her Felicia Hardy at this point, and I still would have bought it with the great blonde Bryce Dallas Howard.
Then it would have had to have been Spider-Man 4, because I wanted to see her in that black cat costume.
Hell yes.
But here's,
like, that would have gone somewhere better than a weak Captain Stacy, and have her conveniently be everywhere where leadership was needed, at the model shoot for the crane, at the key. Like, the overconvenience of her character would be a little more mysterious because it's Felicia Hardy. But then again, also Elizabeth Banks in disguise waiting at the office too.
This is also Don's big bugaboo about Spider-Man in general and comic book movies in general. He hates that, and I'm okay with it, but he hates that, like, there's only 8 people in New York and they all know each other. Like,
well, and I
get that too. I get that too. I totally get it. Yeah,
I understand here, but I'm saying I don't think Gwen Stacy falls into that trap as much as some other instances we could talk about, because she was at the model shoot, right, in this skyscraper, and Spidey was there. He swooped in to save her, just like he saved hundreds of other people, in the years that he's been Spider-Man.
You lost me 100.
It's a great set piece, right? But
awesome set piece.
Because of that heroism, and he saved a whole bunch of people by not only saving her, but also from that that runaway crane. He gets the key to the city, and this high profile daughter of the police chief was rescued in that. She hands him the key to the city. So it's not,
I get how she's a mechanism.
She's woven throughout the story. Showing up.
Here's the next layer where, like, I'll push back and say, wrong mechanism. I mean, wrong character to be the mechanism because of the history that's being smeared by it. And then you make her like a one date boyfriend of Brock. Like now we're just now it's piling on. Like we're too.
I agree. I think the Brock connection, when I was watching this, that did feel a bit odd to me.
And now we're back to magical connection in a city of 9 million people.
Sam Raimi was going to have that character in the movie very briefly.
Yeah.
But because the studio dictated
if Brock,
they had to expand him, which I don't blame Raimi for, because that's just like I said, he's working with what unlike Gwen Stacy, everything with Venom is super rushed, super like we got to get to A to B to C in like 10 minutes. You know?
As much as I hate Topher Grace, and I hate Topher Grace, he ruins every movie he's in. But as much as I hate Topher Grace, if he was just here all movie as the sniveling, competitive Eddie Brock, and your last image of the movie is, a symbiote Spider-Man winning and saving the day against whatever, but freeing himself of the costume, where maybe there's just that hint of like Eddie Brock being around for that first little drop, or however you want to play it. But like, if that, like you said, wasn't rushed and the cliffhanger to get you to 4, I could buy that, and I could hang around enough to be like, all right, Topher, let's see what you can do next movie. Now that you've bought us into the Brock part, even though I don't think he's a very good fit for the Brock part, but at least he would have had time and less rush.
Well, I think, and again, I'm having trouble here because I'm a big comic book reader, and I was reading like the Venom and the Carnage storylines and all that stuff, 20, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I get it, because the Eddie Brock that we get in this movie is different than the Eddie Brock in the comics, from what I remember anyway.
Yeah, he's like a brick shithouse in the comics.
Right. He's a more imposing figure.
Yeah. Tom Hardy,
whereas,
as a matter of fact.
Well, there you go. But in this one, he's almost like the mirror image of Peter Parker, and I think that was an intentional choice. But
I'm going to get to that in a second.
Well, but I want to close out on Gwen Stacy here for a second.
Okay.
Because the feeling I got from this movie was that, and maybe this is my naivete, but the reading I got was that this was it. Like, they weren't planning on doing Spider-Man 4. Or if they were going to do it, maybe they were going to recast and relaunch like they ended up doing with Amazing Spider-Man, or they were going to start like a new trilogy. Because the way Gwen Stacy exits this picture, she is just, they could have just called her Rachel, because her whole arc is she kind of falls in love with Spider-Man, or at least the hero aspect of it. And then she kind of ditches the sniveling little Eddie Brock guy. She kind of goes along with Peter Parker because he gets this, sense of confidence to ask her out. But then it turns out that he's just using her to get back at Mary Jane. And then she's like, the completion of her arc is like, I don't need this. I'm kind of done with these like little shrimpy, egotistical, nerdy guys. I'm out of here. And then she exits picture. She doesn't show up getting, it's not like the big confrontation with Venom and Sandman, and there's like 2 girls dangling from taxi cabs above the city. She's just out of the picture. And I think that's a great way for her to leave. Now, people who are like, but it's Gwen Stacy. I'm like, yes, I understand. Maybe that was a mistake. But in the context of this film, if you can put aside what you know about what she's supposed to be, I think she works really well.
Yeah, and I'm that guy that says, even if you give her another name, she's in too many places. Made worse by the other. But we'll close it out.
Okay. No, I don't disagree. There's a lot of love-hate in here. Not love-hate, but I understand there's problems with the stuff I love.
I was going to say, Ian was essentially half right about the idea of another trilogy.
Okay.
But Spider-Man 4, from what I researched before we got on the show, Spider-Man 4 was in like a serious form of development for a while. There were scripts written, multiple drafts. Raimi was involved for a number of years trying to get it off the ground. But the intention was to make another trilogy, like 4, 5, and 6. So that wasn't the plan. But Spider-Man 4 was in serious development for a while. So I think it's the critical response to this that made them go, "Oh, crap,
I think so."
Start over because
it made money. It made great monny.
It made money, and the first 2 were critically loved. So I think Spider-Man 4 is always ready to go. It's just, I think
it's a shame
the wins of this, from people crapping all over it or whatever. Speaking of Topher Grace, remember in all those random Spider-Man 3 references in Knocked Up? like
No.
they're always like, hey, we're gonna go see Spider-Man 3 in a couple hours, like, and it was probably because I guess he's a friend of the Apatow people. I don't know, but
Sure.
if you ever watch that in a time capsule, people are gonna be like, Spider-Man 3? Which one are they talking about? Spider-Man No Way Home? What are they, it's like very, very random, like it's just a random. It's like the Osborn showing up in that second Austin Powers film. It's very dated reference to the time that movie came out.
Yeah, that's the thing is, again, I think this, and I want to jump ahead a bit to the end of the movie because it's something that really stuck out to me. The first two movies ended exactly the same. Spidey defeats the villain, and even though it's kind of a melancholy victory because he ends up killing two, sort of mentor, almost, pseudo father figures that he's lost a lot of father figures in his life. Mm-hmm. He always ends up swinging through the city. And there's like the big heroic score and everything. This ends with Peter going to see Mary Jane, like performing at that like coffee bar, I think, or maybe it was a different place. Yeah. But she comes down off the stage and they just kind of like hold each other and they're sort of like dancing and it's very slow. And they have this look of uncertainty. It's almost like, and yes, I'm going to make this comparison, sue me. It's almost like the end of The Graduate where, they elope, they run away from the church which is sort of like the end of Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
Running out of the marriage it was never meant to be. They get on the bus and you think it's going to be great, sunshine and roses. Mm-hmm. But as they pull away, you see them and they just kind of like stop and they're just sort of like looking at each other like, well, now what? Like, where do we go from here? Was this a good idea? And that's the vibe I got from the end of Spider-Man 3. I'm like, wait, they're cutting to black and going to credits. This is not summer blockbuster material.
Well, and because Spider-Man 4 never happened, they actually kind of allude to that in No Way Home by not much, but they kind of say like, we worked out our issues. She's still around, but you get the impression that they're not exactly like the happily married forever couple. Like they've got issues, they've got stuff, and it's the power of those characters that lets you like have two lines that explain that No Way Home, and you're like, oh yeah, I get it. It's fluid. It goes from where you're talking about.
But even before that, if you'll remember, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the Peter Parker from that reality who ends up going, crossing over and joining with Miles Morales, part of his arc is that things fell apart with Mary Jane. So when he runs into the Mary Jane of Miles Morales's reality, he's like, love struck and, nervous and everything is like, I got to make this, work or whatever, because things got screwed up. And he finally finds the courage at the end to go back to his, regular life and try and make it work. So, yeah, I don't know that either. Well, No Way Home definitely is connected to the original trilogy. Yes. I don't know that Into the Spider-Verse is, but it feels like there are threads possibly reaching out there.
I think eventually it may, because they're starting to. The MCU is starting to implement the idea of animated characters being able to show up. I mean,
like what if?
Very briefly in Doctor Strange, they're in an animated universe.
Captain Carter.
And Captain Carter has showed up. So it's very possible they could end up being some connection. Though I will say that in Spider-Verse, a very select part of the audience was laughing when they reference emo Parker dancing, and they're like, we don't talk about that part of Spider-Man's history, which I thought was pretty great because some of us live that like it's our Vietnam.
True. It hurts.
Yeah.
Let's talk about emo Parker.
Oh boy.
I will defend emo Parker in a way that I would not have defended emo Parker before this rewatch. Actually, I'm going to take a quick break here because we've got some comments.
Hit it.
And I feel like we can't deny Petty, our recently minted computer science PhD.
Right.
Yes. Good night, guys. Wait, are you leaving? No. When the movie was released, Sam Raimi already knew that something was not going to work. One of the worst things is emo Peter. We will talk about that, Petty. I agree, but I don't agree. I think you'll agree with me that one of the best things about the movie is J.J. Jameson's performance by J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons was the best actor of the trilogy.
No argument there.
I think he was the most comic accurate. I don't know about best actor, but he's definitely up there. Because, I mean, you've got Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus.
He's very good.
There's so much solid acting in this movie, even with Harry Osborn. Yes, even in this movie, I think.
I got. I'll do Defoe. I'll do Molina, and I'll do Simmons. After
I didn't know you went that way.
No. But
Right.
yeah. But
Maybe that's-
after that, I fail to find good. Because I think Kirsten Dunst is a wet paper bag. I think
What?
Tobey Maguire.
Absolutely not. No way.
I think Tobey Maguire has just not just emo Parker, but before then he just is way too daft, and then Franco's Franco, and it's a drop off after those three.
Franco is
Big
really bad. Franco's really bad in Spider-Man 2. He's really bad in that one.
Oh,
I
but
barely
no,
remember him being in it.
No, that's the whole point. It's he's bad. But no, to defend the J.K. Simmons thing, I think he's so good in these movies that, like, you could have arguments that if they put a Dr. Octopus in the MCU, which they kind of have now, but you could see them recasting. You could see them recasting a Green Goblin, which they did in the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I don't think you can replace J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson.
And they've proven that by bringing.
I think
him
that's
back.
how
Yeah.
good.
Yes.
I think that's how good of a character he is.
Yeah.
And to defend J. Jonah Jameson's honor as not a true villain, there's one human element that I really loved Sam Raimi did. I don't remember if it's in 1 or 2. I think it's 2.
Okay.
But it's either Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus is like choking him in his office and says, like, where did you get those pictures of Spider-Man or whatever? And J. Jonah Jameson knows Peter Parker took the pictures, and he doesn't reveal the name. So I thought, like, there is like
That's an old dog journalist.
There's
Dan
a
Geyer move. You know,
I know, but there's a dastardly element to him. But, like, he's also
to
not
Spider-Man,
like,
not to
he's
his
not,
people.
right. He's also not a coward who's going to be like, whatever you say, sir. Yeah, that was Peter Parker. Like, I like
grant
that
that.
he had that moment of,
That's cool.
like, I'm sticking up for my guys, and that was cool.
Okay.
Well, I also liked in Spider-Man 2 the whole bit where Mary Jane was engaged to his son, and then at the wedding, like when she walked out, like, yeah, he was mad, but you also got the sense that he was really kind of sad just for a bit moment for his son, because his kid didn't. We didn't get a lot of him in the movie because he wasn't important. But we got the sense that he was at least the kind of guy that Mary Jane could end up with. Not, he wasn't J. Jonah Jameson Jr. in temperament, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And the other weird thing is that I think a lot of people expected, because I remember when the trailers for Spider-Man 2 came out, and we have the scene of, like, can't remember his name, but Captain Jameson, like, because he's an astronaut, right?
Right.
He and Mary Jane kind of coming down the steps, and there's all these, flash bulbs going off. People were suspecting that, oh, he's an astronaut, he's going to go into space and bring back the Venom symbiote.
Yeah.
Now that didn't
I was ready
happen.
for that too. Yeah.
Right. And I think that was sort of a missed opportunity. I think you start.
Oh, you mean a missed opportunity not to have one more thing related to the same 9 people in the movie? Oh, thank God.
Oh,
Well, no, I'm
Don.
just going to say, if
I
you
know,
want to, and
Yeah.
you could have. I'm not
I know.
saying put Venom in Spider-Man 2. I'm just saying plant that seed there.
I'd be cool with a planted seed there. Yeah.
And then even what would have been kind of like Hitchcock's, suitcase bomb. And yes, I just said that on YouTube. I'm sorry. I hope we don't get de-streamed. But that whole idea of if there's a bomb in a suitcase under a table, suspense is, just wondering when it's going to go off or if. Imagine there is a Spider-Man 4. You plant the Venom seed in Spider-Man 2 and don't bring it back for 2 movies. And you're like, oh my God, that's
I
right.
would love that. Yeah. But
Right.
no studio is ever that patient unless your name is Marvel. And unless your name is Marvel in phase 1 and 2, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's where, and this is one of the things I want to get to, and we'll get back to emo Peter Parker, but
yeah,
I think there's way too many plot lines in this movie. I think that 80 to 90% of them are handled very well for the 10 minutes of screen time that they get. They're almost like mini pilots for other movies or a Spider-Man TV show.
Yeah,
I know we disagree. I know we disagree on the amnesia thing with Harry.
Yeah, I could shave off the amnesia, but like the tension between Mary Jane and Peter and the dichotomy of ego and success, very solidly done for what it is, despite the frenzy of which it's mixed in.
Yeah.
And then obviously our emergence of Franco, I don't buy the amnesia part, but the fact that we're building back to villainous Franco is worth it. Sandman, worth it until you do the Ben Parker thing, but worth it. J. Jonason's angle of like the competing photographer parts of Eddie Brock, rushed in there, but worth it. Yeah, I'm with you there. Just the pieces that are there can be good, but there's just too many of them. And then there's always that one little hitch that F's them up.
I just figured out how you make the amnesia thing really work.
Ooh, I'm listening.
Now, I think in a vacuum.
Oh, I'm sorry. What was
nice,
that?
nice.
Okay, yeah.
You should change your name right now to James Franco Ruins Everything.
Oh, I didn't have enough room.
You just check your earpiece for the reading. You're like, yeah. Got it.
So,
Thank you. Yeah.
in the movie, Franco reemerges as he takes up the mantle of the Green Goblin. He attacks Peter Parker when he's on his scooter. They fight above the city. Franco gets knocked down and into an alley, and he goes to the hospital, and that's when it's discovered that he has amnesia, which allows him to forget only the last, year or whatever since his dad died.
Yeah.
He remembers that he and Mary Jane and Peter Parker were once close. And so, again, that comes back to that kind of ticking time bomb element. There's a moment of suspense, is he... Because you see, this is sort of like part of Peter Parker's everything's going up roses for him.
Right.
Because he's like, hey, my best friend is back.
Yeah.
And hopefully he'll never remember the truth.
Yeah.
But I think, because it is kind of ridiculous, especially because he comes back, he is great, everything's fine, but then he remembers because his ghost dad visits him, not Bill Cosby.
Right.
And then he takes up the mantle of Green Goblin. Well, but he gets the Green Goblin thing again, and then they fight. He has a pumpkin bomb thrown into his face.
I know.
Do you remember what those things did to the corporate board of Oscorp in the first movie?
do.
It turned them into glowing blue skeletons. This thing blew up centimeters from his face, and he just ends up
heals quick too, doesn't he? Yeah.
Well, he's gone for 40 minutes. And you're like, oh shit, that's right. Harry Osborn was in this movie. The way you fix the amnesia storyline.
Okay.
You play the long game. You go to the hospital. The doctor comes out and says, yes, he's got short-term amnesia, and you go with it. And then you just have Harry Osborn gradually, we see him manipulating the situation and ending up where he ends up, right?
Yeah.
And then when he pulls the reveal to Peter Parker, he's like, amnesia? Really? I paid that doctor to tell you that.
Yeah.
I'm the son of a millionaire, you idiot.
Yeah.
And
I was hoping for more nefarious puppet strings. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Let's elevate him more. Because when he starts to control and manipulate, that's where ooh, even Willem didn't do that. Let's go there. And then they kind of don't. So
and you can even stretch that out to another movie, because for as much flack as the Amazing Spider-Man got the Garfield films, the one thing I thought was kind of cool is that you've got the Harry Osborn of that movie trying to pull together the Sinister Six using his dad's resources. Imagine a James Franco, sorry to say his name again, planting those seeds of building a supervillain coalition to go against Spider-Man in Spider-Man 3, 4, 5, and then you end up with the Sinister, Spider-Man 6.
I like it. It could be totally done.
Yeah,
because if this was build up 3,
but
no, if this was build up 3 and you could do a Venom blowout in 4, a cratered, return of things in 5 that builds and flows, and then 6 is the throwdown, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
So,
all right, Will, do you want to jump in here, because I'm ready to talk about Emo Peter?
Yeah.
Well, I want Will to talk. I feel like I'm monopolizing things.
No, you're all good.
All right.
I'm gonna defend Emo Parker off the bat, because this is also something that is not helped with the Topher Grace situation, because what they're setting up is interesting. They've touched a little bit on this in Marvel recently in the MCU, with Kang and things like that. It's kind of like that. Wow, imagine if this was given to someone truly evil or something. What I like about what the black suit does to him, it makes him a dork, but this is a Sam Raimi film. It's going to be cheesy and dorky. What I like about it is that he's so inherently good that it takes a long time for him to be so bad that he has to hit Mary Jane in the face, right? But mostly it just increases his ego, makes him dance around and stuff.
Sure.
Now, the reason why I say that the Topher Grace stuff kind of hurts that part of it is because we're force-fed Topher Grace, and he has to turn so quickly. We never buy that he's truly evil, but we also don't know how good he is. So the turn kind of hinders his turn to an evil person. Kind of hinders the development of what they were doing with Peter Parker, which is, imagine if this malevolent force took over such a good person that the worst thing they really do is just kind of dance aggressively and point, and
Sure.
and then you would see if it was better written or we didn't have Topher Grace, maybe it was a different character, maybe the main villain or something. If you saw what that would do immediately to a person who is truly evil or mean, you would see that. So that's why I kind of give it a break, because I know where they're going with it, but it's actually not the Tobey Maguire Raimi part that's at fault. I think it's the Venom stuff, because the suit is doing what it would do to a naturally good person. I mean, it takes him a long time to get, and I don't think he doesn't, and then correct me if I'm wrong, so it's been a couple months, but he doesn't strike Mary Jane because it's Mary Jane. He's reacting to someone grabbing him, right? So it's not like he was like, Mary Jane, paw! Like, it's more of like a reaction thing.
A WWE bump, yes.
But it also speaks to what you're talking about, Will, of him being a genuinely virtuous person. That moment.
We're all right. He did freeze.
I think Ian was so
Back.
startled.
Sorry, I think
he was so shocked he was actually agreeing with me. He froze.
I think his black T-shirt kind of got a hold of him too. Symbiote over there. Oh boy.
No, sorry, I froze. Everything went like really quiet. It was very strange. I started to smell toast. No,
okay.
Peter Parker is such a virtuous person that it takes him slapping or striking Mary Jane. If this had been James Franco under the influence, and I'm not talking about Harry Osborn, I'm talking about actually James Franco. If it had been him under the influence of the Venom costume, I think he would have just kept going, be like, yeah, that's what you get. But no, absolutely. Peter is like, I've done a horrible thing. I've got to get this thing off of me. So
great, and I think it also the fact this supports one of the best scenes in the movie too. The fact that we've been introduced to such a goofy version, like pseudo evil Peter Parker, right? It makes like the scene where he's trying to get the damn thing off of the bell tower more frightening, because you realize like how deeply ingrained it was in him that, I mean, even though he wasn't doing anything like truly evil, like
that's where
this thing is in his body. Like, I love that scene where like he's just screaming to get that damn thing out of his body. Like, and that's a very horrifying moment. And I think the juxtaposition of that, you're seeing Goofy dancing Peter Parker, and then suddenly you've got this guy trying to rip this organism out of his body. Is pretty haunting, really, in my opinion.
See, that's where I come at it, where call me the twisted one, especially with the presence of Raimi. I don't think any of that turn for him picking up the symbiote and turning emo in this movie. I don't think any of it is dark enough. Especially considering Raimi. I know, but
Raimi's not a dark guy.
Yeah,
Raimi he has dark humor, like the Fountain of Blood and Army of Darkness and stuff. But he's also got, reindeer statues, laughing, and evil ghouls. He's not serious. Like, he's not super dark.
But the thing is, like, when you're talking about the course between becoming emo and the virtuous guy becoming dorky instead of evil. And then you want that to matter by the time we get to the bell tower, where anguishing good scene. Bravo, for sure. But if before that, the circumstances that got him there were truly hefty mistakes born from evil, or just harder mistakes than accidentally hitting a girl, like I said, a WWE manager style. Like, I didn't mean to hit you. Oh my gosh, was the referee watching? Like, just that. The emo stuff to me isn't dark enough. When he's borrowing milk and cookies from the neighbor, like, I get the nonchalantness, and I get that if you take a virtuous person and you do that, where we're playing Captain America Erskine shit here, where like I know what it turns people into, but for me, if you want that anguish to be anguish, have it come with some pain and some mistakes that have to be fixed from it. And there's not enough of that when all you're doing is pointing and dance.
Let me ask you this.
I get that, but that was my point. Basically, is that we're not getting the effective use of the other side of it to drive home the evil part.
If this wasn't rushed and this was more than a montage and a half of bad songs, if this was 45 minutes of a movie and Peter descends further and further and there's time given to that, and we get to that bell tower and all that, then the anguish, the change, the transformation of that guy, character traits and all, has been baked in a little longer than the very quick emo stuff that it is.
Well, two points. One, and this has kind of become a trope in third installments of comic book movies.
Ooh.
Not necessarily the new Spider-Man movies, but it happened in Superman 3. It happened in X-Men 3, Spider-Man 3. The main hero goes bad. And I think the gold standard of this is still Superman 3, because Superman really gets, dark and drunk, and like he has maybe consensual sex with a woman. And he just like does all this stuff. He cracks the leaning tower of Pisa or straightens it out, whatever. But that's a really good example of what I think you guys are looking for. But my question, and this might sound like I'm going back on what I'd said about comics earlier, but it's just a question. My recollection of, and I haven't read all of the Spider-Man comics and all the Venom stories, so it might be that I just missed a bunch. But my recollection is that the spider suit, which I think came from like Secret Wars initially.
Sure did.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like
sorry, I froze again. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
It's this darn black suit. But no, so Secret Wars, he brought the suit back to Earth, and it's just a black Spider-Man costume until he realizes it's actually, this alien thing that's trying to change me. But my recollection of Venom is that it was an antagonistic relationship, pretty early on.
Yeah,
like,
it's the bipolar stuff and the dual identity stuff like that they play up really well in the Hardy stuff, even though it's a hard-hammy thing to sell. I wish more of that was in this.
But that's what I'm getting at. Like the source material that they were looking at, was there a comics run where Peter Parker really went insane and did a bunch of regrettable things in the Venom costume? Or was it more like what we're seeing in this movie? Well, like that costume becomes its own evil thing.
Nothing like what's in this movie, but
nothing like what's in this movie.
Well, but what I'm saying, the degree to which he's affected by the suit, he never goes completely dark.
The best comp I got is actually the '94 cartoon. The three movie arc of Venom in that cartoon where Peter gets rough and mean and loud, like it's pretty damn good for a cartoon of all things. Where go find and it's like a 3-parter and an easy thing to do. Where do the Venom saga of the '94 cartoon.
Well, that's what I'm getting at is the people who were writing this movie, if they're going back, and I don't know if they're watching the cartoons or if they were just like looking at the source material, it might not have occurred to them to say, okay, Peter Parker is going to take on this suit and he's going to do some really crazy, dark, messed up things. The point is he gets this suit, he's tempted and sort of corrupted by it a bit, but then he realizes what it is because it's Eddie Brock who's supposed to be the villain of the piece. It's never supposed to be Peter Parker. So again, I agree with you. I think this could have gone in a much darker direction, but I think the storyline that we have, I think if you pad that out for 40 minutes and get rid of some of the other stuff, I think it could work. I think the Topher Grace stuff could work because you're right, Will. I think the problem is we don't get enough time with his character, and the bits we do get are sort of uneven. Like the whole thing of like, oh, he's going out with Gwen Stacy kind of, or they had a one-night stand or whatever. Yeah. But I love the scene in the Daily Bugle where he's posted he's got the new promotion to Peter's old job. He's got the big framed cover of Spider-Man in the black suit, like stealing money or whatever it was. And then emo Peter comes in and says, hey, I know I have the proof here that you photoshopped that and you stole like my old pictures and photoshopped, your nonsense in it. And Brock is like, look, man, he doesn't he gets a little bit defensive, but he doesn't like threaten him. He kind of melts. Yeah. He's like, look, you could really ruin my career.
Brickhouse comic Brock wouldn't. He would. He'd flip.
But what I like about that is that vulnerability that I think the Venom symbiote eventually, I think, again, you pad this out or flesh this out more and you get it. But I got that from this. The Venom symbiote was feeding on Brock's insecurity, giving him the power that he always wanted to have, the confidence he always wanted. I think he portrays himself, or he thinks of himself as sort of a ladies' man. You can see it in the way he talks to Gwen, but he is just kind of a dork, almost like Peter Parker. He's more of a suave, insecure, you could almost call him an incel.
Still his fault. Because he can't play ladies' man, even a fake one. And then by the time you put the teeth and the pulled up makeup eyebrow on him. Like, I can't raise my eyebrow, but let's let a piece of the symbiote pull it up for you. It's like his portrayal of the dual role of Venom is just so bad. Like,
Well, yeah,
he
and it
was
goes-
already bad, and then when he shows up as Venom, it's awful.
And that's a bad writing part too, is that
Yeah.
it goes from what
Hey,
Ian's
Parker.
talking about, which I think is effective, the vulnerability part. I think it goes from that, and then like maybe like a scene later, he's in church going like, "Please God,
Yeah.
kill Peter Parker." Like you're like, how
Where's
did you
that
get to
time of
that
unemployment
moment?
too? You know,
Like-
like if
Well,
That
I
was
actually
kinda wild.
liked that moment
that scene
because
belongs.
it's
too
almost
quick. Yeah.
well, it's
a good
almost
moment.
like a
good moment.
it's a good
Yeah.
moment. And I remember I was at Comic-Con, I think the year before this movie came out, and they were
Ooh.
showing like some teaser stuff, and that was how
Yeah,
they
they showed
revealed
that.
Venom, right?
Yeah.
I think the real cut when Venom like launched the screen or
Comes up,
whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But there was a nice turn where you see Eddie Brock go into the church and sit down and or kneel and pray, and he's like doing something sincere, and then he's like, "Please God, please kill Peter Parker." It's like this dark, like, holy shit, what are we even talking
Yeah.
about now? But I think like later on when they're up in the web and they're doing the whole taxi cab thing, and Venom or Brock has Peter Parker, dead to rights. He's kind of, the mask comes back, and that insecurity, he's like, "You stole my job, you stole my girl." Like it's not that evil, like leering villainous thing. It's the insecurity
It's
coming out,
sniveling,
and it's the monster giving him the ability to take out his insecurities on the guy that he's projecting is the source of all of his problems.
Yeah.
I think that was really effective. It's just that again, it's number 16 of 17 things that are happening in this
Well,
climate.
that reminds me a lot. I think this would have happened 2 years before, because when did episode 3 of Star Wars come out? 2005?
The year before
Yeah.
this.
Mm-hmm.
The year before. Okay, so it reminds me of
2
that
years.
moment.
2. Yeah.
It reminds me of that moment with Obi-Wan when Ewan McGregor, giving it his all, is screaming like, "You were the chosen one. You were supposed," like in isolation, you're like, wow, that must be a really powerful moment that's been built up over 3 films. Must be extraordinary, right? And then you watch it in the context of the 3 films, you're like, oh, well, where did that come from? Because there's nothing that justifies that kind of reaction. That's kind of what I got here was, I love all of these scenes in isolation are cool. They're just, they don't make sense put together,
Thank you.
Or
Well,
not.
then well,
Don's vindicated. Good night.
yeah, but no, but with
God,
the other thing with
God.
Venom, but the other thing with Venom is he's supposed to be the indomitable, undetectable spider sense, scariest MFer he's ever faced.
You've always had this
and
problem.
it's Topher Grace. It's like as soon as
But
he
you had
shows
that
up,
problem
like
with
yeah,
the
and Tom
Hardy
Hardy's
one, too.
Tom Hardy's no better. He's a boob. He just they I get that the dual identity thing is a hammy sidebar thing, but it can't be all movie and every time he's on screen.
But I think
And that's
to
it's
support
a
what Ian was
pussification of
saying
the best
about,
villain he's got.
and Ian will know more than I do about Venom, because I never really liked the comic version much. I only like the movie version from Tom Hardy, so he'll know better than me. But I think in comics history, am I wrong in assuming that for the most part he's more of an anti-hero? Slash
well
after
after
guy, as opposed to when he was introduced as a bad MFer, right?
That's kind of where I dropped off. Like when Venom became Wolverine, in that he had to be part of everything, and like it's kind of like what Batman is now in DC. Like there's like 900 Batman comics out there. But I kind of but they had to do something with Venom to warrant giving him into his own series. I would love to see a Venom movie where it was just about this, a villainous character who needs to be, turn him into, the MCU's Jason Voorhees,
something, man.
You could even have, right,
especially with Raimi.
But in the connotation that he's the unstoppable force that has to be put down by the virtuous characters. I'm not saying you have to have like
by
Venom
the
7.
skin of his teeth too, not the banging some bars and throwing one bomb. Like he's also beaten so easily.
Well, but that is actually, from what I remember, that is
that's
comic
accurate. But
like, I thought it was an interesting. It was kind of cheesy the way that Peter had the flashback to the bell tower and everything, but I think that was a bit of comics language because people were probably so checked out by then. They're like, "What?"
Oh yeah,
but
because that scene's beaten to death for me by all the newsreel forced like care moment, like you should be feeling bad because the newsman told you, oh crap, look what's happening. Like,
And that random
seems
like British news reporter.
Oh, it's
Like,
all that layer overbakes that scene where, like, if you have sympathetic villain Sandman and you have, your evilest mirror image Venom, get the public out of the way and have mano y mano, not the newsreel stuff. So,
Well,
yeah,
but
I'm checked out by that scene too.
But in fairness, if they have
New York, yeah, I know.
well,
I have
but
all the
anywhere
city
you've
there.
got people suspended by giant spider webs
I
and
know.
the sand monster and stuff, there's going to be a
Great.
crowd.
Leave them on the ground and have some screams, but don't
What
give
the
them the
hell
newsreel crap.
accent was that?
I don't know what New York accent that was, but it's working for me. Are you talking?
Dude, you could have a part in Moon Knight season 2.
Exactly.
But no, what is
It's already the
Oh.
kingpin, so might as well.
Yeah.
Mm,
The head, old head. That's all I was saying.
damn it! I was going to say something. I completely lost it. Hold on. Let's go because Betty's got
Yeah.
some other things to
Hey,
say
hit
here.
us up.
New generation. All right.
I imagine that when Stan Lee saw Peter in this movie, he must have thought The Godfather, where Vito says, "Look how they massacred my boy." R.I.P. James Caan, by the way. Or perhaps they took the money, saying, "Oh no." Anyway,
Well, I can
Yeah.
confirm that is definitely not the case with the money because Stanley
Okay.
was continually effed over by Marvel in all iterations.
No surprise.
well, it's just consistent with legacy creators from from all generations.
Yeah, so it definitely wasn't the money, is all I'm saying.
And then
if I were to recast Venom, oh my gosh, now you gotta make me dig into the aughts for like who would be the imposing presence in the aughts. I gotta come back to you on that one.
okay, yeah, because
What
do
about-
that because
here's
I missed one. Do you think
Mhm.
Stan Lee would have been happy with this movie? I think he
easy to
would
please.
have.
Yeah.
Only in the sense that we haven't really talked about the action scenes as much as it's weird watching the Green Goblin and Peter Parker on the scooter stuff. There's a lot in here, and the Sandman fight on the bus that reminded. I felt like I was reading John Romita Sr. and John Romita Jr. comic panels. Forget about the rubbery body 2007 CGI,
I think
which still
great,
looks
but-
pretty good on Blu-ray. But I felt like they had really gotten that panel action, the kinetic, flow of everything down pretty
Absolutely.
good. So I don't know what Stanley thought about this movie, but I think it was in the spirit of the comics that he was, wanting to create for people.
How about a twist on what Don was saying, or about a casting? What if it was Thomas Hayden Church that was Eddie Brock? He's kind of built like a shit house.
Yeah.
brick shit
Yeah,
house
it could
in
work.
one.
He looked so good as Sandman though, but it would work.
Well, yeah, he's
Yeah.
really good. I mean, I love the character because not only is it kind of like a little bit of, in terms of where Peter Parker's head is at, I mean, 'cause doesn't he pretty much immediately, everyone in the movie immediately writes him off because he's a thug, right? Because he was in prison.
Yeah.
So I think even Spider-Man does that. But
Yeah.
also I like the fact that there is a physical, like, this is not something that Peter Parker or Spider-Man can easily defeat. It's like
And yet he does.
quite a very, no, he doesn't defeat Sandman.
Oh, Sandman? No, that's true. Yeah.
Sandman.
But he
Sandman,
growls like a bad mummy villain from the aughts as well. So like even some of that characterization is a little cheesy too. Love the effects,
sure, but I'm just saying, like,
but when
physically,
we're Cinderblock monster, I'm like, oh come
yeah,
on.
you can't. But I'm saying
1990s go away.
he can't punch his way out of that problem.
True.
Well, and
Yeah.
but let's talk about Sandman. I know we already have, but
Yeah.
I need your guys' help to figure something out. So he gets out of prison. He escapes in the movie, and at the beginning of the movie, he ends up on the run from the cops, getting into a giant like molecular blender. That's he's essentially Brundleflied, except it's Brundle sanded. Turns into this creature. And I guess he's stealing money to pay for his daughter's illness treatments or whatever. Am I right so far?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, I think Spider-Man and he have an understanding about, like, Peter understands where he's coming from.
Mhm.
And then Sandman is like, I'm sorry, I killed your uncle. It was an accident. Again, I think it's contrived and everything, but
Mhm.
I like the way that it was executed, because instead of just the whole idea of, yeah, here's the real guy who killed your uncle, it was, here's the real guy that killed your uncle, but there were special circumstances. Like, he had the gun on him, Ben was talking him down, and then the other guy that Peter thought had murdered him shocked him. He like ran up, he's like, we gotta go, and he's like, well, shit, and he the gun went off. I think it works. I think
Absolutely.
if you take 2 or 3 other storylines out of this movie
Yeah.
and you weave that more in there, because it speaks to, like, in this movie you also get Peter having to deal with the fact that he, at least he thought, killed an innocent man. Because when he threw that guy out the window in Spider-Man 1, he felt, vindicated. But then when he went to go tell his, Aunt May, she was like, "What the hell do you mean? Am I glad he's dead? Your uncle wouldn't have been on board with that." So Peter's carrying that around. But with the Sandman, I'll get to my point. At the end of the movie, when they kind of come to their understanding, and Peter sort of lets Sandman go, not that he could have stopped him, Sandman just flies off into the city. Is he still going to be going out and stealing shit to pay for his daughter's treatments? Because we never really get an answer of how that resolved.
I would assume so, and that's another problem with Spider-Man 4 not happening is the loose ends that will never be tied up.
Because if he lingers and hides from the authorities for a while, and you bring him back for Sinister Six, like, it very plausible. Because unlike most movie villains in comics, they're not one and done kill-offs. So, like, that's kind of nice that he's still around for a change,
and because he's still alive, we do get a great well, I don't know if he's alive. I don't know how he got into No Way Home, because then they say they came in at the moment of their death by Spider-Man, but never mind. But it does have one of the best lines, which kind of summarizes how goofy the Raimi movies are, even though I love them. They're goofy as fine, is when he's talking to Electro, and Electro's like, "Yeah, I fell into a thing of electric eels," and he's like, "Yeah, I fell into a particle collider. You got to watch where you're stepping." I mean, why a particle collider is in the middle of New York City anyway? Who knows?
Yeah.
But
with
it's
no
just
security,
no security whatsoever. It's just, I thought, it's kind of fun. I mean, that's why I don't take these too seriously, these movies.
No, it's true.
They're incredibly silly from the outset. I mean, that's what you're going to get with comics and Raimi to begin with.
Yeah.
But
for Flip, Marco, I think you overcomplicate an already rock solid thing that where you don't like now. Because I mean, one of our complaints with Spider-Man movies is the same complaints with Batman movies. We always have to kill Ben Parker. So now we've been killing him 3 movies in a row. So like you had it, it was solidified. It was comic accurate. You did everything you needed to do and got Peter where you needed to go. You didn't need to overcomplicate it just to on a villain who has enough of that backstory that you can play with that doesn't need the help.
And I'm going to get general here to support what me and Don talked about recently on our Cinephile Hissy Fit about the Gray Man, and what Ian's talking about. By watching it and being like, "Wow, I was waiting for this to suck." It's the unfortunate thing is stuff gets into the consciousness, and it's only gotten worse over time. Me and Don talk about this all the time. It's like either something is the worst thing in the world or the best thing in the world. I think we've forgotten that it's okay for a movie to be flawed and still be entertaining and okay. Like, I love this movie, but I can still sit here and acknowledge too many villains, bad script writing, contrivances. But like, I think we're like the cultural consciousness on this one has made it to the point where Ian's going to pop it in and go, "Holy crap, there's actually good things about this." I mean, you watch the movie and some of the Raimi touches in this are gorgeous, especially in the first half hour. Like I said, there's moments where you're waiting for it to suck. I remember when I showed it to my daughter, I was like, "Well, no one likes this one. I like it, but it's probably a mess. I'm crazy." And she's watching, she's into it. Like, and yeah, there's definitely problems, but I don't think it's the worst film ever made or the worst
no
problem, but people will label it that, you know, so.
Me, I'm not going to go that far either, but I admit on Letterboxd, and will love this, I took this movie and I dropped it from 3 to 2. It slipped for me.
Wow.
This was bad. This didn't.
You had it at 3?
I did. Where like I had because I was there in 06, fanboying it up. I had a good time. Like, all right, hey, like there's for me as the comic book fan, I've seen that said this in the show. All of this is dream fulfillment, even when they're bad. Like, I'm just happy they made it and they existed, and someone took a swing to make this comic come to life. But by the time I don't know, do the fine line accounting, I was out. Yeah.
Well, that's where history hurts this film too, is because when the MCU has a bad film or a film that doesn't quite work out the way they want it to, there's usually been enough of a universe built up and enough faith in the characters that you'll still go to see the next installment. I have no doubt in my mind that if there was a Spider-Man 4 directed by Sam Raimi, it would be just as successful, if not more,
I agree.
than 3, 2, and 1, because
Yeah.
the foundation was built
Agreed.
for it to succeed, even with a speed bump. Just like the MCU can survive a Thor: The Dark World, or in my opinion, the worst MCU film, Age of Ultron, it can survive those because the foundation is in place. I think Raimi put enough of a foundation that if there was a Spider-Man 4, I guarantee not only would Spider-Man 3 be looked on perhaps less negatively, but it would be just like they did in No Way Home. They would take the moments out of it that, are good and expand on those and try to forget the crap that that doesn't work. Though I do have a question, Ian. You can help me with this because you watched it recently.
Yeah.
In No Way Home, Tobey Maguire says his best friend died in his arms trying to kill him, but in this movie, doesn't he save him?
Oh boy.
I don't remember him trying to kill Peter Parker. I remember him fighting the Sandman and doing that. Like, so I never quite understood that plot point either.
Now here's a possibility though.
Okay.
I know this is going to get like really Swiss cheesy, but it was the Tobey Maguire from the Sam Raimi universe. But was it the Tobey Maguire from the same reality in which Harry teamed up with him to fight Sandman? Could it have been the Tobey Maguire from an alternate timeline within the Sam Raimi verse where Harry did die trying to attack Peter Parker, like they never made up?
Okay. Well, I mean,
oh boy.
The breaking point would have to point would have to be somewhere within 3, because they do kind of clarify that 1 and 2 did happen for sure, because both of those villains show up after their deaths, because the script, even though it ignores it in the case of Sandman and a couple others, says that the villains only show up at the moment of their death from Spider-Man.
But what I'm getting at is, imagine a reality, and this is what the multiverse is all about, like alternate realities and possibilities. Imagine the beginning of Spider-Man 3. Peter Parker is on his scooter driving, through the city, or he decides to take the subway, so he's not out in public, and Harry's just like gliding around looking for him. He never finds him. So they have a confrontation later where Spider-Man's in the full spider costume fighting Harry on the glider. They get into it, and Harry dies in Spider-Man's arms. So it's the same Raimi reality, but it's a different reality within that context.
I got you.
It could have just been someone not paying attention at the script level of No Way Home, or having said, "I'm not going back to watch Spider-Man 3. You can't pay me to do that." And they're fuck it, he died when he in his arms. But I'm saying it's a possibility.
Okay, I will never be able to watch that movie the same again. Thank you, because that's all I'm going to be thinking about is going to be like, okay, so when in the timeline did it branch, and when did I'm going to be thinking about that forever. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I thank you for it too, because it will ruin good shows in the future for Cinephile Hissy Fit. Can't wait. Can't wait.
I'm here to please, gang.
That's right.
All right. So Petty also writes, let's be honest, it's a good movie designed to entertain and not to educate the audience like the latest superhero movies today. That's why it's still remembered, which I doubt about the new movies.
I mean, this movie is kind of pillarless in terms of, the social justice underlying things that the MCU likes to try to do lately, of like, hey, we're like, look at all of Phase 4, talk about grief. Look at all of the reluctant hero arcs and things like that. This movie is a little messageless, tone policing ish.
I also don't agree with the new movies won't be remembered, because not only are they an institution now after 15 years, but I mean, people still talk about the original Iron Man and the first Avengers and stuff like that. So I don't know.
And that's a whole other show, because I think within Marvel you can break it down like phases 1 and 2 are drastically different from like phases 3 and 4.
Totally.
Because we're also talking about different social eras in which they took place.
Agreed.
You could not get away with half the stuff with Tony Stark did in Iron Man 1 today.
Yeah.
But
this for its time too. This is a post 9/11 New York rejuvenation, which is a beautiful thing for the city. Yeah,
which is
for 3
true.
movies.
However, that was in the back of my mind, and I was kind of surprised when that whole crane thing happened. I'm like, because there's
Mhm.
straight up imagery of like people sliding out of office buildings, where the
Mhm.
front has been taken off. I'm like, holy shit, I
Well,
can't believe this
they
got
went
green.
there.
Well, I'm sure you guys all remember the first teaser trailer for the first Spider-Man was before 9/11, and he's webbed up a helicopter in between
Yeah.
the World Trade Center, and then
Mhm.
they had to take all that stuff out. And
Yeah, great trailer, because it's one of those scenes
yeah.
that's like not in the movie, but it was there to sell it. It's perfect.
yeah, and then
it's
it
cool.
was, and then of course they had the, "Don't mess with us, New York" moment in the
Oh.
first one where they're throwing like cans of eggs or something at the.
Yeah.
Is there a can of eggs? I don't even know what that means.
Right.
Whatever. They're
This
throwing
could be now.
eggs and
Go with
or
it.
cans at Green Goblin. Go, stay out of my city.
Yeah.
So there you go.
All right, let's kind of wind down here, but we haven't really talked about what we sort of touched on it with the whole died in his arms thing. But yeah, Harry Osborn comes back, and it had been a meme for this series and for this movie in particular, the butler who knew everthing.
Oh
Who
God.
kind of steps in to say,
Thank you for bringing this up.
Harry, I was there the night your
Yeah.
father died.
Oh, the warble, the age, it's awful. I know it's Bill Paxton's dad, but come
Was it?
on.
Oh, he
is
is.
I didn't
Paxton's
realize
dad.
that. Wow.
Yeah.
If you watch the gag reel on the DVD, he
Cool.
is like 70% of the gag reel because he could not get his lines out. Like he was.
Gee, I
just like,
wonder why.
I
Hire
was your father's butler. Like he's
Hire for
questioning his own
senility next
lines.
time.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
That could have been anybody, any other capable actor. It would have been. It's also overconvenience number 374 in this movie as well.
however, but here's the thing. I didn't have as big a problem with it this time on this rewatch because I've watched the whole trilogy recently. That guy is like the Kaiser Soze of the Raimi trilogy.
He's in there.
Because
Yeah.
he's always in the background during the key scenes. So when he pops out, people are like, "Oh, he's Basil Exposition over here." That's because he didn't just come out of nowhere.
I would have
He was
cast
there
Michael
the
York.
entire time, and you can that would have been awesome. But you can see
that,
how he was like
Yeah.
keeping these secrets and everything, and you could understand why. And that was the exact moment where he was like, "Look, your friends are in danger. Yes, they're still your friends. Your dad was a fucking lunatic. Get your act together and go save people."
Yeah.
Right.
It would have been great if he actually used those words in a PG-13 movie. But
And same thing with everything else. If that was baked in over a little more time, not rushed like every other thing that gets us to that climax, it might hit a little harder. And then yes, actor delivery is a large portion of that for me. Where like again, props to Bill Paxton's dad, but he's awful.
Well, and there's no real like payoff with it either. Like I don't know. Have you guys ever seen the for performance wise? I mean, have you guys ever seen The Cooler with Alec Baldwin?
Yeah,
and William H.
long
Macy.
time ago.
Good movie.
There's a scene in that movie where there was an extra that has a line. It was probably just a friend of the director or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he's in the background, like gambling or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he's supposed to say something to Alec Baldwin. And it's on the gag reel. Like, he messes up this line 50 times. And, like, everyone's getting mad except the director because he's probably a friend of the director. And it ends up, the thing that ends up being in the movie is Alec Baldwin getting so mad at this guy. The guy finally gets the line right. And his line is just supposed to be like, hey, shut the fuck up. He is so angry. He's just like, would you shut the fuck up? And then he walks off. It's like, that's like a nice, happy accident from like a terrible performance. But this guy, he just delivers it and then he's gone. And it's like oh, we didn't even get a cool, like, we didn't get a cool, like, improv moment of, like, James Franco, if he was like, what the fuck? What the hell are you talking? Like, but that would have been awesome because it would have been like, what? Like,
it didn't have to be Michael Caine. It didn't have to be some grand actor in there. But
we're having a Wayne's World 2 moment here, guys.
But also
the guy at the gas station who turned into Charlton Heston.
Yeah, but we're also copying Batman tropes here too by throwing in a trusty butler that knows all the secrets. We're like, oh boy, now we're just piling more dumb cliches on. So.
I think it would have been awesome if that guy had turned out to be like the Green Goblin's Alfred, like building his bomb.
Yeah, well, that would maybe have a little more, again, involvement.
Well, okay, Butler aside, he's the way that we get to Harry Osborn turning into Han Solo, and coming in
Oh
to
my
help
God,
rescue his
yeah.
friends.
Woohoo!
Yeah, it's
That's my Han Solo.
I love the how it should have ended YouTube take of this movie, where all of their suggestions are pitch perfect. I love that show.
well. Give us the your favorite highlight. I got to go back and watch that now.
It's some of this is the butler, the reaction that Will's talking about, like, why didn't you tell me earlier? You knew this the whole time. Like, the reaction to the butler is probably my favorite part of the how it should have ended one, if not the hey buddy old pal convenience of Franco. All of it. They're so good. They nailed it in that one. But
Well, but we get to the kind of the rescue, and Harry comes in with his pumpkin bombs and his glider, and he's really helpful, and Peter's on the brink of death, and then Harry gets it's only a week and a half ago, but I've already forgotten. Didn't he get stabbed through with the dual spikes on his glider or something like that?
I think so.
I
may have
vaguely remember it having
2
some kind of like
seconds.
symmetry with his dad's death, but
Yeah,
I think the
so.
symmetry was there, which again, oh, how lazy and over convenient is that? So yeah,
It's poetry. It rhymes.
oh
But-
God, I know, yeah.
But no, after Sandman blows away, there's that really, I think, a really nice scene over the
It is.
city as the sun's coming up of, Peter and Mary Jane and their dead friend. Like, it's almost like, for those of you who are big Dawson's Creek fans, as I was, it was like Joey Dawson and Pacey sharing a nice moment together.
Oh man,
Yeah, bizarre love triangle indeed. But I just thought it was that, and then leading into the kind of like the flash forward of
yeah,
however
the
many days or
melancholy you
weeks,
talked about, yeah.
right, of that ending. It's like, yeah, these people are really changed by this, and it reminded me sort of like Spider-Man No Way Home, how instead of this big thrilling heroic theatrical ending, it's like, well, yeah, no one remembers it, no one knows who Spider-Man or Peter Parker was, and his friends are off having these lives that he sacrificed his own kind of identity to save. It's kind of sweet.
And admittedly, it has become it was nice, but it also, in hindsight, has become repetitive because like both Garfield movies end in a bit of sorrow notes too. So, yeah. So it is a nicely done scene, and even though I think Tobey Maguire has one of the worst cry faces in all of Hollywood, it's genuine emotion and fine attempts from two actors trying their best.
You're not supposed to look good when you cry.
But he's extra bad.
Trust me,
really
I cry,
rough.
dude. I cry every night before I go to sleep. I
I'm
look
not far
terrible.
behind. I know, but
So,
Every night
yeah.
before.
But
you
no, like,
go to bed,
I think
my
but I meant-
darling.
But I mentioned this earlier, where I don't know what it is about Toby, but like I noticed it in this movie, in this viewing, where every time there's an action scene and they go to like a Toby close up, he has the most goofiest, like bad Star Wars pistol shooting face for like the moments that he's been throwing around or doing whatever. It's like, oh, it's Ernest Goes to Camp bad of just how can you contort Toby's face and then catch it on camera and edit it into a really cool action scene.
Do not
Ernest?
besmirch
Oh.
Ernest Goes to Camp.
Okay,
The movie that gave us
sorry.
Eggs Erroneous.
Thanks, Ronnie.
Yellow modeling clay. That's the secret ingredient.
But no, it's good work from Toby after a long, rough movie.
Yeah, the only thing is, like, he does have that kind of blank stare. You get a little bit of it in the French restaurant where I almost said Gwen, but Mary Jane is like giving him the business. He's like, what? It reminded me of when he was on Saturday Night Live and they were doing the Jeopardy thing where he was playing Keanu Reeves.
Yes.
well, to
Oh
be
my God, that
to be
stare.
honest, in real life at that point, he was probably having two things happen at once. He probably lost about $500,000 at the poker table the night before that scene with Molly's game, and he was probably on so many painkiller drugs because I think at that point he had really hurt his back or something like that. So I think he was just completely like depressed.
And he's 37
and
years
stoned.
old playing 19. I know.
I think he was just stoned out. Yeah, that's true. So I think he was stoned and broke and was just like, what?
It was literally Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, shit, where's the bus?
Yeah.
Real quick, is this the best? So I have the feeling you're wrapping up. Is this the best Bruce Campbell cameo of the three movies?
Absolutely. I think so. I know it's an overlong joke, but it's good.
It's a close second. I think it's tied with the cameo in the first one, just
Oh, that's
because
good.
it's hyped up Bruce Campbell, and like when he says, I'm the human spider. He's like, God, that sucks. And it's like, it's the amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah.
But I did love him in this, where he's like snapping and doing the whole like. I told my wife, I'm like, there should be a TV show where Bruce Campbell just plays a French waiter, like in a New York restaurant. Yeah, it's great. But yeah, anything else to say about Spider-Man 3?
No, I have a cultural artifact from that era. If you would like to see.
Oh dear, your socks you used to have Kirsten Dunst moments in from 06? No, okay. Save her for Chicago, Will.
You mean last week? No.
God.
When I rewatched Power of the Dog for the fourth time. It is funny because it does involve a date, but for whatever reason, like I have a bathroom with two cabinet medicine chests, right? And I don't use one of them, but I had to go into it for some reason this morning, and I found, I don't know why this was in here. I'm gonna try to show it on the camera. This is a Spider-Man 3 hacky sack that I won in a. It says Double Trouble on there, whatever the hell that means.
You won it in a poker game with Toby. I know it.
No, but it's. I was on a date and I won it in a machine or something at an arcade, and the date went about as well as the critical reviews for this film.
That was my next question. Yeah.
So I have this Spider-Man 3 ball and it's mostly blue, to always remember those adventures back in 2007.
Yeah.
So,
you got to clean out the old web shooter sometime.
Yeah. I hope that woman's watching right now.
Well, I mean, 2 years later, my daughter was born, so something happened. But
2 years. No,
no. For a creature like me, it's the ingestion state is like 24 months. So don't worry about it.
I got you.
Okay. No, my question is, did you win this ball on this date like around the time of Spider-Man 3, or were you just like at some arcade like a decade later and they still have this Spider-Man 3 they're trying to get?
This was the height of Spider-Man 3 mania. So I got it and I was like, I'm going to keep this. I'm going to keep this.
The hype was real, man.
No, it was pretty. The hype was.
I watched that trailer so many times, man. Like,
wow, you watched a trailer?
Back then, I was all in, man. I was all in.
You became what you hate.
Yeah. I've become what I hate. Correct.
But I don't want to bury the lead here, Will. We have to figure out. I know you said you don't know how it got in there, but seriously, how did that get into your medicine cabinet?
I opened it today and I went, that looks like Spider-Man. I looked at it. I'm like, that looks like Maguire Spider-Man. And then on the back is this Spider-Man 3. There's the black suit. And I was just like, I'm talking about the Spider-Man 3 tonight. That's pretty interesting. Oh, yeah, I got that on a date. Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm a huge failure when it comes to women. Anyways.
This is proof that we're living in a simulation, guys, because what are the odds that you would find that artifact?
No, wow. It was, I think the point of finding it was if there truly is a God, and I'm on the fence about it, but if there is, it was just to remind me of my foibles and to be like, hey, I want you to go on a live stream, an international live stream, and talk about the one prize you got on a terrible date. So there you go.
Stanley would have called that a no prize, which I think is a
it kind of is, because I obviously haven't touched it in however many years.
Well, we know what you're doing when the cameras stop rolling tonight, going out in the lawn and hacking. Go for it. Well,
just don't do that on the lawn. What are you doing? Anyway, this has been the Spider-Man 3 retrospective, everybody. Bring your kids. No, but guys, thank you very much. I know we went a little bit over long. Who knew there was that much to discuss about Spider-Man 3, but I think I don't think we changed any minds. In fact, I feel sorry for Spider-Man 3 because it got downgraded on Don's letterbox. Jeez. But I'm glad that we were able to talk about it honestly, without like slinging any dirt. And really, I feel like I got some cool perspectives out of this. So thank you guys.
If we can plug, in the lead up to No Way Home, Cinephile Hissy Fit did do a complete deep dive of every universe. We did a Raimi-verse episode. We did a Garfield. We did Venom. We did all those. So
Holland.
You can hear me defend Spider-Man 3 more, and then you can hear Don like it a little bit more than today. Back then. So so if you want to check out our archives for that,
I will leave a link to that down below.
Thank you.
And well, I'll probably just, since you did a whole bunch of them, I'll leave a link to the
Just
Raimiverse one, and then folks, while you're there, check out the other universes.
Deal.
Yeah. So anyway, you guys, thanks again. We've got Don Shanahan, we've got Will Johnson, both of the Cinephile Hissy Fit Podcast, Don of 25 Years Later, and Every Movie Has a Lesson. Links to all you guys' stuff and the rest of Earth's Mightiest Critics who weren't able to join us for various reasons tonight. I love having the whole gang together, but it was also nice just, and your little blue ball there.
My blue ball.
Yikes. But it was nice having just this kind of intimate dissection of Spider-Man 3, and that is not a callback to your love life there, Will. But anyway, thanks. If you liked this show, please, like and subscribe and give us a thumbs up, and, feel free to comment. I'll check the comments later. If you watch this and you're like, what the hell are you guys on? I'll answer that question. So until next time, and I think next time is probably going to be a couple weeks from now when we come back to, or some of us, to talk about DC's League of Super Pets, which still, as you recall, does not break my comics moratorium or superhero moratorium. I'm excited to see that movie, not just because I'm paying outrageous amounts of money to see it in a Dolby Theater. 11 a.m., $15. Thank you, AMC.
Wow.
Times 4. Anyway, thanks, guys. Wait, anything else my guests want to say before we go?
No. See you in Chicago, Will.
Yeah, I'll be in Chicago this weekend. So if anyone wants to hang out with me and my ball.
Yeah, hit us up in the socials and we'll meet you up. Sunday, the 25th.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I think you'd need to leave the ball at home, Will.
25. Oh, it's my comfort thing on the plane. I don't know.
Don't do that on the plane.
So rub your balls.
Yeah, but no, me and Don will actually be getting together. Ian was invited, but I think he's way too cool to hang out with us. So
no, I'm going to be hanging out with my son for his birthday.
Yeah, family, lame loser. Anyway,
I get it.
No, we will be hanging out and doing some live recordings and all kinds of stuff. We're going to collaborate with, you'll probably agree, and Blonde in Front and a couple other Chicago-based people. So if you want to hang out with us, let us know.
Yes, I know you guys are still putting that together, but is there a link or anything to that? Or
no, I think it's a bunch of recorded content that ends up being banked for stuff later. I don't think there's going to be a live show to it.
I got
maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, I actually want to ask you about something like that off the air. But yeah, it's going to be like you'll probably agree with Mike Crowley, but maybe we'll release the audio as Cinephile Hissy as well. That way we have some cross, whatever, pollination or whatever. So.
All right. Well, if if you end up, whatever the plan is, send me links. Even when the shows go up, I'll stick them in this live stream down below, so people watching this in the future can experience the magic of Will in Chicago with his ball. Anyway, thanks everybody. Good night. Take care, and Excelsior, as the man said. R.I.P. Stan Lee.